Poor Shoemaker gave all his life savings to a girl years later. She saved his life. The shoemaker's hands shook as he counted the last few bills on his wooden table. Outside, rain hit the street in thin, tired lines like it had been falling all his life. He did not know yet that this moment would change two lives forever. His name was Elias. He lived in a narrow room behind his shoe repair shop, a place so small that the smell of old leather never left the air. The walls were gray with age. The floor creaked when he walked. His tools were older than most people he knew, their handles worn smooth by decades of honest work. Every morning Elias opened his shop before the sun fully rose. He swept the dust from the floor, lined up his brushes, and sat on the same low stool. He fixed broken soles, stitched torn leather, and polished shoes that no longer shined for their owners. People passed his shop without looking. Some did not even remember his face, but Elias remembered theirs. He remembered the tired office worker who always said thank you too softly. He remembered the old woman who paid him in coins wrapped in a handkerchief. He never rushed them. He never complained. When someone was short on money, he waved his hand and said, "Pay me next time." Sometimes there was no next time. At night when the shop closed, Elias sat alone with a small lamp and a tin box under his bed. Inside it were his life savings. Every bill had been placed there slowly over many years. He had skipped warm meals. He had worn the same coat until the elbows broke through. That money was not for comfort. It was for fear. Fear of getting sick. Fear of being old and helpless. Fear of dying with no one knowing his name. That evening, as the rain grew heavier, Elias heard a sound at the door. Not a knock. A pause. Then another. He opened it slowly. A girl stood there, soaked from head to toe. She could not have been more than 17. Her hair stuck to her face. Her shoes were too thin for the cold. She held her arms close to her body, like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was barely there. "I don't want to steal. I don't know where else to go." Elias looked at her shoes first. The soles were broken. Water leaked in with every step. "Come in," he said. She hesitated. "I won't stay long." "That's fine," he replied gently. "You'll catch a fever out there." She stepped inside, and the warmth made her shoulders shake. Elias handed her a towel and poured hot water into a chipped cup. "My name is Lena," she whispered. He nodded. "I'm Elias." She stared at the floor, then at the tin box when he moved it by accident with his foot. Her eyes filled and she turned away quickly. "I need help," she said. "Real help. And I don't deserve it. What would you do if the only money you had stood between you and the end of your life? Would you hold on to it or let it go?" Elias felt the weight of the tin box under his bed. He knew before she said another word that helping her would cost more than kindness. It would cost him everything. The rain did not stop, and neither did the question growing in his chest. Elias did not sleep that night. After Lena drank the hot water, she sat on the edge of the stool in the shop, still wrapped in the towel. Elias gave her his old sweater, the one with a small tear near the collar. It hung loose on her thin shoulders. She looked like someone who had been running from something for a long time. "You can rest in the back," he said, pointing to the small room behind the curtain. "I can't," Lena replied fast. "If I stay too long, they'll find me." Elias heard the fear in the way she said they. It was not a normal fear. It was the kind that lived inside the bones. He did not push her. He simply sat across from her hands, folded, and waited. The shop was quiet except for the rain and the small ticking clock on the wall. That clock had been there longer than any friend Elias had kept. Lena finally spoke again, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I just need a little money," she said. "Enough to get away. Enough to start over." Elias breathed in slowly. A little money meant something different to a girl like her than it did to a man like him. "How much?" he asked. Lena's lips trembled. She swallowed hard. 14,000, she whispered. Elias felt like someone had pressed a hand against his chest. 14,000. That was not pocket money. That was not a kind donation. That was a number that could change a life, either hers or his. Elias did not answer right away. He walked behind the curtain and sat on the edge of his narrow bed. The tin box was under it, as always. He pulled it out and placed it on his knees. He ran his fingers over the scratched metal lid. This box had been his plan, his safety, his future. He remembered the first time he put money into it. He had been young then. His wife Marisol had been alive. They had laughed about how small their savings were. Back then, they believed life would get better. Then Marisol got sick. At first it was small, just tiredness. Then long coughing fits that left her face pale. Elias had taken her to clinics, waiting in long lines, holding her hand while strangers spoke in cold voices. He spent money on medicine that did not work. He sold his wedding ring. He sold his bicycle. Still, she grew weaker. One night Marisol had touched his cheek and said, "Don't let the world make you hard." 2 weeks later, she was gone. After the funeral, the shop felt louder because of the silence. Elias worked longer hours, not because he loved shoes, but because working kept his mind from breaking. He stopped buying anything unnecessary. He stopped visiting people. He stopped dreaming. The tin box became his new promise. Every time someone paid him, he put a little away. Sometimes it was $5. Sometimes it was 10. Many weeks it was nothing. But he kept trying because he was terrified of becoming the kind of old man who died on the floor and stayed there for hours before anyone noticed. His daily life was simple and heavy. He woke at dawn and boiled water for instant coffee. He ate bread if he had it. Then he opened the shop. He worked with the same calm patience no matter who walked in. A businessman once threw a pair of expensive shoes on the counter and said, "Fix them by tonight." Elias looked at the torn stitching, then at the man's impatient face. "I can fix them," Elias said calmly, "but leather needs time. If you want it to last, you wait," the man scoffed. "I'll go somewhere faster." Elias nodded. "That's your choice." The man left and Elias returned to his work without anger. He had learned something after Marisol anger did not bring anything back. Another day, a young mother came in with a child in her arms and a worn-out boot in her hand. Her face was tired in a way that reminded Elias of his own past. "How much?" she asked, eyes darting to her child. Elias inspected the boot. The sole was separating. The stitches were broken. "It will take an hour," he said. "And the price?" she asked again quietly. Elias saw the coins already in her hand, counted in advance. He paused and said, "Just bring me a smile next time." Her eyes widened. "Sir, go on," he said gently. "Your boy needs shoes more than I need those coins." She left with tears on her cheeks, whispering, "Thank you," as if she was afraid the world might hear and punish her for receiving kindness. That was Elias. He gave even when he had little. Not because he thought he was a hero, but because he knew what it felt like to be alone in a cold world. Still, kindness did not erase fear. At night, when the street lights flickered outside his window, Elias thought about his own body getting weaker. He had started waking up with pain in his knees. His fingers sometimes cramped while stitching. He ignored it. He had no time to be sick. That tin box was the only thing that made him feel even a little safe. Now in the back room, he stared at it and imagined it empty. He imagined himself lying in a hospital bed one day, needing help and having nothing. He imagined the shop closing forever. He imagined hunger. And yet he also imagined Lena walking back into the rain, hunted and hopeless. Elias returned to the front of the shop. Lena flinched as if she expected him to yell, but he simply sat down again. "I don't have that kind of money," he said carefully. Lena's face fell. She pulled the towel tighter around her. "I understand," she whispered. "I knew it was stupid. I'm sorry for bothering you." She stood up quickly like she wanted to run before he could change his mind. Elias held up a hand. "Wait." Lena froze. Elias watched her trembling hands. He watched the bruises on her wrist, faint but there. He had noticed them earlier, but said nothing. "Who are you running from?" he asked softly. Lena looked toward the window as if she expected someone to appear behind the rain. "They'll take me back," she said. "And if they do, I won't get out again." Elias felt something cold move through his stomach. "Your family?" he asked. Lena shook her head, eyes filling. "It's not family," she whispered. "It's people who say they own you when you have nothing." Elias had heard stories like that on the news. He had always told himself those stories happened far away to strangers, not to a girl standing in his shop. He leaned forward. "Do you have anyone you can call?" "No," Lena said quickly. "No one." "Where is your mother?" Elias asked. Lena's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked down and shook her head again, slower this time. Elias understood without being told. He reached for a small notebook and a pen. "Tell me what you need the money for," he said. "Not just the number, the reason." Lena hesitated. Then the words spilled out in a rush, like she had been holding them in for too long. "A bus ticket out of the city," she said. "A place to sleep for a few weeks. Papers. A program. Someone told me there's a shelter that can help me, but they said I need to get there fast. They said I need a small deposit for a room, and I need to pay for a legal clinic because my documents, my ID was taken. And if I don't leave tonight or tomorrow," her voice cracked, "they'll move me again. And then I'm done." Elias stared at her. 14,000 suddenly stopped sounding like a number. It became a door out of hell. He looked at Lena's face. She was young, but her eyes were older than she should have been. He thought about Marisol again. He heard her voice. "Don't let the world make you hard." Elias swallowed his throat tight. "You said you don't deserve help," he said. Lena laughed once, bitter and small. "Because I'm dirty," she whispered. "Because I made mistakes. Because people look at me and only see trouble." Elias shook his head. "I see a girl who's still alive. That means there's still a chance." Lena stared at him confused, as if she did not know how to accept such words. Elias stood, walked behind the curtain again, and pulled out the tin box. The metal felt heavier than it ever had. He placed it on the table between them. Lena's eyes widened. "What is that?" Elias did not answer immediately. His fingers rested on the lid. His heart was pounding loud in his ears. This money was his entire life. Every sacrifice, every lonely night, every meal skipped, every fear swallowed down. If he gave it away, he would have nothing. And yet, if he did not, Lena might not survive. Elias looked at her and said very quietly, "Tell me the truth, Lena. If I help you, will you really leave tonight?" Lena nodded, fast tears finally falling. "Yes, I swear. I'll disappear. I'll do everything right. I just need one chance." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. This was the moment. The moment where his fear and his heart stood face to face. And Elias realized something with painful clarity. The only way to save Lena might be to destroy the only safety he had left. He opened his eyes and gripped the lid of the tin box. "Okay," he whispered. Lena's breath caught. "Okay." What Elias's hand began to lift the lid. And in that second before the box opened, before the choice became real, the front door handle suddenly moved. Someone was trying to come in. The door rattled once and stopped. Lena's whole body went stiff. Her eyes locked on the door like a trapped animal. She did not scream. She did not move. But Elias saw it, the fear that went deeper than panic, the kind that came from being caught before. Elias stood up slowly and placed himself between Lena and the door. "Stay here," he said under his breath. He walked to the door and opened it just a few inches. A man stood outside under the broken awning. He wore a dark jacket and held a cigarette between his fingers. His face was thin, sharp in the streetlight. His eyes moved past Elias, trying to look inside. "Shop's closed," Elias said calmly. The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I'm looking for a girl." Elias did not answer right away. He felt his heart beating hard, but his voice stayed steady. I fix shoes, he said. Not people. The man leaned closer. She ran off with something that isn't hers. Elias met his gaze. Then you should talk to the police. The man laughed quietly. Old man don't make trouble. I'm not, Elias replied. You are. There was a long pause. Rain dripped from the awning between them. Finally, the man took a step back. If you see her, he said, pointing inside with the cigarette, tell her she can't hide forever. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the wet street. Elias closed the door and locked it. His hands shook as he turned the key. Lena slid down against the wall, covering her mouth to stop herself from crying. That was him, she whispered. One of them. Elias knelt beside her. You're safe, for now. She shook her head. No, not safe. Just not caught yet. Her words stayed with him. Not caught yet. Lena wiped her face and took a shaky breath. They found me once before, she said. I thought I was free. I thought I was smart enough. She hugged her knees to her chest and stared at nothing. I grew up in foster homes, she continued. Always moving. Always being told to be grateful for whatever I got. When I turned 16, I left. I thought freedom was just walking away. She laughed bitterly. I didn't know how expensive freedom was. Elias listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that real listening meant letting silence do its work. They offered me help, Lena said. A place to sleep. A job. They said I could pay them back later. Her fingers dug into her arms. At first it was small things. Cleaning, carrying bags, smiling at people. Then it wasn't small anymore. Her voice dropped. When I tried to leave, they took my ID. They said without papers, I didn't exist. Elias felt his jaw tighten. They move girls like me, Lena said. From city to city. If you get tired or sick or loud, you disappear. She finally looked at Elias, her eyes full of something close to shame. I didn't run because I was brave, she said. I ran because I was scared of dying. Elias nodded slowly. That's enough reason. She wiped her nose with the sleeve of the sweater he had given her. There's a shelter 2 cities away, Lena said. They work with lawyers. They can help me get new documents, but they won't hold a spot. I have to pay for the room myself. They said if I don't come this week, they can't protect me. Elias looked at the tin box on the table. How long until they come back, he asked. Lena shrugged. Hours. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. Silence filled the shop again. Elias walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. The street looked empty, but he knew better than to trust quiet. He turned back to Lena. You said 14,000, he said. She nodded. That's everything he asked. Yes, she said quickly. I won't ask for more. I swear. Elias sat down heavily on his stool. The truth was cruel and simple. 14,000 was almost exactly what was in the tin box. He had counted it many times over the years, not because he enjoyed it, but because knowing the number made the fear manageable. If he gave it to Lena, he would not have a safety net. No savings, no backup, no protection. Just his hands, his tools, and his aging body. Lena watched him reading the answer in his silence. I know it's wrong, she said quietly. I know I'm asking too much. I can go. I'll figure something else out. She stood up again, her movements quick and sharp. Elias felt something break inside him. He imagined Lena stepping back into the rain, the man from earlier waiting somewhere in the dark. He imagined her being dragged away. He imagined the guilt that would sit in his chest for the rest of his life. He also imagined himself 10 years from now, weak alone, unable to pay for medicine, wondering why he had chosen someone else over his own survival. Fear pulled him in both directions. What kind of man do I want to be at the end of my life, Elias thought. He spoke before he could stop himself. Sit down, he said. Lena froze. What sit? He repeated gently. She obeyed, her eyes wide. Elias reached for the tin box again. His fingers trembled as he opened it fully this time. Stacks of worn bills stared back at him. Some were old, some were faded. All of them carried memories. He took a breath that felt like it came from his stomach. "This money," he said slowly, "is everything I have." Lena's mouth opened, then closed again. "Then please don't. I'm not finished," Elias said. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. "I've lived a long time," he said. "Long enough to know that money only protects you from some kinds of pain. Not all." He pushed the tin box toward her. "If I keep this," he continued, "I might live a little safer. But if I don't help you, I won't live with myself." Lena shook her head hard. "No, I can't take that. You don't even know me." Elias smiled sadly. "I know enough." Tears streamed down Lena's face. She did not touch the box. "You'll have nothing," she whispered. "What if you get sick? What if you fall?" Elias shrugged. "Then I'll fall knowing I did one right thing." The word surprised even him. He felt afraid, terrified, but underneath the fear was something calmer, something steady, the kind of peace you feel when you stop running from who you are. Elias slid the box closer. "This is not a loan," he said firmly. "You don't owe me anything. Not a visit, not a thank you, not a promise." Lena stared at him like he was speaking another language. "Why?" she asked. Elias thought of Marisol again. He thought of the young mother and the broken boot. He thought of all the small kindnesses that had never come back to him. "Because someone once saved me," he said, "and I couldn't save her." Lena's hands finally reached out, hovering over the box, shaking. "I'm scared," she said. "So am I," Elias replied. They sat there facing each other across the table, the tin box between them, like a fragile bridge. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, Elias made the hardest decision of his life. He pushed the box all the way into Lena's hands. "Go," he said softly. "Before they come back." Lena broke down, crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. "I won't forget you," she said through tears. "I swear." Elias stood and turned away. "Just live," he said. "That's enough." Lena clutched the box to her chest. She stood, wiped her face, and moved toward the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back one last time. "What if I never find you again?" she asked. Elias smiled, tired but gentle. "Then that means you made it," he said. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Lena stepped into the night carrying Elias's entire life with her. And when the door closed behind her, Elias felt the shop grow very quiet, very empty, and very final. The door clicked shut and the sound echoed longer than it should have. Elias stood alone in the shop, staring at the empty space where the tin box had been. The table looked naked without it. For a moment his legs felt weak, like they might give out. He sat down slowly. Silence pressed against his ears. No rain, no footsteps, just the ticking clock on the wall, loud and steady. Tick, tick, tick. He had known this moment would feel heavy. What he did not expect was the strange calm that followed. Fear was there, yes, but it had softened, like a storm that had already passed and left only wet ground behind. Elias cleaned the shop that night, even though it was already clean. He wiped the counter. He lined up his tools again. He folded the towel Lena had used and placed it carefully on the shelf. When he finally laid down on his bed, sleep did not come right away. He stared at the ceiling and thought about what tomorrow would look like. No savings, no backup, no safety net. Just another morning, another day of stitching shoes. And yet when his thoughts drifted to Lena, he felt something close to relief. He imagined her on a bus holding the tin box, close, staring out the window as the city faded behind her. He imagined her breathing freely for the first time in a long while. That thought carried him into sleep. The next morning, Elias woke before dawn. His joints ached more than usual, but he ignored it. He washed his face with cold water and opened the shop like he always did. Life did not pause to honor sacrifice. A man came in with a cracked heel. Elias fixed it. A teenage boy dropped off sneakers and complained about the price. Elias stayed quiet and worked. At noon, he ate half a sandwich and saved the other half for later. Days turned into weeks. Elias felt the change slowly, like a weight being added one small stone at a time. When his old sewing machine broke, he could not afford a replacement. He fixed it himself with wire and patience. When his coat finally tore beyond repair, he stitched it again and again until the patches overlapped. At night, the fear returned. He would wake up suddenly heart racing, thinking about sickness, about falling in the shop and not being found until morning, about the tin box that was no longer under his bed. Once he reached for it out of habit and felt only dust. Still, he did not regret his choice. Every time doubt crept in, he remembered Lena's face when she realized the money was real. He remembered the way her hands shook. He remembered the way she had walked out the door standing a little straighter than when she arrived. Months passed. Elias's body changed. His fingers grew stiff in the mornings. His vision blurred sometimes when he focused too long on fine stitches. He laughed it off, telling customers, "These old eyes need more light." But inside he was worried. One afternoon, a sharp pain shot through his chest while he bent to pick up a shoe. He froze, breathing shallowly until it faded. He did not tell anyone. He could not afford to. That night he sat on his bed and spoke to Marisol out loud like he sometimes did when the loneliness grew too heavy. "I hope I did the right thing," he said softly. The room did not answer, but he felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. "Yes, you did." Meanwhile, far away, Lena's life was changing in ways Elias could never see. She arrived at the shelter with shaking legs and empty eyes. The staff looked at her carefully, asking questions she was afraid to answer. When she placed the money on the table, the woman across from her went silent. "Where did you get this?" the woman asked gently. "From someone who believed in me," Lena said. The shelter helped her find a room. They helped her contact a legal clinic. Slowly, piece by piece, Lena rebuilt what had been stolen from her. The first time she slept in a locked room alone and safe, she cried until morning. She worked part-time at a bakery, waking up early to shape dough with tired hands. The smell of bread became something comforting, something real. In the evenings, she studied. She read until her eyes burned. She learned words she had never been taught before. The money disappeared faster than she expected, but not wastefully. Every dollar went towards survival and freedom. Sometimes late at night, Lena opened the empty tin box. She kept it under her bed even after the money was gone. It reminded her of the man who had saved her without asking her to be anything in return. Years passed. Lena grew stronger. Not loud, not proud, just steady. She completed her education with the help of scholarships. She worked 2 jobs. She learned how to speak up, how to say no, how to walk away. She searched for Elias more than once. She went back to the city where she had met him. She walked the streets looking for the small shoe shop. Once she found the building, but the shop was closed that day. Another time, a new sign hung in the window of the store next door, and she wondered if time had erased him. Life pulled her forward before she could search harder. Elias, on the other hand, felt time pressing in. One winter, the cold settled deep into his bones. He coughed more often. His hands shook even when he was not tired. He lost weight without trying. Still, he opened the shop every morning. One evening, as he closed the door, his vision darkened. He grabbed the counter and waited for the room to steady. It did eventually. "Just tired," he muttered. He did not go to a doctor. Doctors cost money. Instead, he worked slower. He sat more. He learned to rest when the pain came. Despite everything, there was a strange peace in his days. He no longer counted money at night. He no longer planned for a future that scared him. He lived one day at a time. And then one morning, Elias woke up and knew something was wrong. His chest hurt in a way it never had before. Not sharp, heavy, like something was pressing down on him from the inside. He tried to stand. The room spun. Elias sat back down on the bed, breathing hard, sweat breaking out on his forehead. He waited for it to pass. It did not. He pressed a hand to his chest and whispered Marisol's name. For the first time since giving away the tin box, Elias felt truly afraid. Not of being poor, but of dying alone. Outside the shop remained closed that day, and somewhere in the city, far from the small shoe shop, Lena was walking into a hospital for work, unaware that the man who had saved her was standing on the edge of his own life. Time moved quietly the way it always did when no one was watching. For Elias, the days began to blur together. He still opened the shop most mornings, but not as early as before. His hands needed more time to warm up. His knees protested when he stood for too long. Customers noticed. Some asked if he was all right. He smiled and said he was fine. It was easier than explaining. There were days when business was slow and the shop stayed empty for hours. Elias would sit on his stool listening to the ticking clock, watching dust move through thin lines of sunlight. In those moments, loneliness pressed hardest. He missed having someone to speak to at the end of the day. Sometimes he imagined Lena walking back into the shop, older, stronger, free. He wondered if she was alive, if she had escaped, if the money had been enough. He never allowed himself to regret giving it, but he did allow himself to worry. Winter came again harsher than the last. The heater in his room barely worked. Elias slept in layers, his breath visible in the dark. He coughed more now, a deep sound that left his chest aching. He ignored it and went to work anyway. One afternoon, he slipped while carrying a box of shoes and fell hard on the floor. The pain shot through his hips, sharp and unforgiving. He lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, waiting for someone to come in. No one did. Eventually, he pushed himself up, using the counter for support. His hands shook so badly he had to sit down again. That night he could not sleep. He thought about the tin box again, about how easy life might have been if he had kept it. He thought about hospitals, about doctors asking for money before help, about forms and bills he could not pay. For the first time in years, doubt crept into his thoughts. What if I made a mistake, he whispered into the darkness. The room stayed silent. The next morning, Elias did not open the shop. He stayed in bed exhausted, staring at the wall. Hunger gnawed at him, but standing felt impossible. He drank water and told himself he would open tomorrow. Tomorrow became the next day. Meanwhile, Lena's life was moving in a very different direction. She stood in a bright hospital hallway, her hair pulled back, a badge clipped to her jacket. People nodded at her as she passed. Some smiled, some asked questions. She answered calmly, clearly, with confidence she once thought she would never have. She worked as a patient care coordinator now. It was not glamorous, but it mattered. She helped people understand their treatment. She helped families navigate paperwork and costs. She listened when they were scared. Every day she saw faces that reminded her of who she used to be. Lost, afraid, invisible. She never forgot Elias. She kept the tin box on a shelf in her apartment, empty but polished. Sometimes she opened it and ran her fingers along the metal. It reminded her where she came from. It reminded her why she worked so hard. Once a year on the same date, she took the day off. She never told anyone why. She simply sat quietly, remembering a small shoe shop and a man who had chosen her life over his own safety. She tried to find him again. She searched online. She visited old streets. She asked shop owners nearby if they remembered a shoemaker named Elias. Some shook their heads. Others said the shop had been there a long time ago. Life kept pulling her forward. Promotions came. Responsibilities grew. She moved to a better apartment. She earned respect. But none of it erased the quiet promise she carried inside. If I ever find him, I will help him. No matter what. Back in the old neighborhood, Elias's absence did not go unnoticed. A woman who brought her shoes to him every month frowned at the closed door. A delivery man knocked once or then left. Days passed, then weeks. One evening, Elias finally forced himself to open the shop again. He moved slowly, leaning on the doorframe. His face looked thinner. His eyes were dull with exhaustion. Just a few hours, he told himself. But his body did not listen. While fixing a pair of boots, his vision blurred. His hands went numb. The needle slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the floor. Elias tried to stand. Pain exploded in his chest. He gasped, gripping the counter, sweat pouring down his face. The room tilted. Sounds faded. He collapsed to his knees. For a moment he thought of Marisol. Then everything went dark. When Elias opened his eyes again, bright white light burned them. Machines beeped softly nearby. His mouth was dry. His chest felt tight and sore. He tried to move and failed. A nurse noticed and leaned over him. "Sir, can you hear me?" Elias nodded weakly. "You're in the hospital," she said. "You had a severe cardiac episode. Someone found you in your shop and called for help." "Someone," Elias whispered. The nurse smiled gently. "A delivery driver." "You were lucky." "Lucky?" The word felt strange. A doctor came, later explaining things Elias barely understood. Blocked arteries, emergency treatment, tests, recovery. Then came the question Elias feared most. "Do you have insurance?" the doctor asked. Elias looked away. "No," he said quietly. The doctor's face softened. "We'll do what we can, but there will be costs." Elias closed his eyes. This was it. The moment he had prepared for his whole life and then given away. The fear returned heavier than ever. That night Elias lay awake listening to the machines. He wondered how long he would last. He wondered if anyone would come for him. He thought of Lena again. "I hope you're okay," he whispered. Across the city, Lena was finishing a late shift when she received a call from a colleague. "We're short-staffed in cardiology," the woman said. "Can you help review intake files tomorrow morning?" "Of course," Lena replied. The next day she sat at a desk flipping through patient records. Names, ages, conditions. Then she froze. Her eyes locked on a familiar name. Elias Moreno. Age 72. Condition severe cardiac event. No insurance? Limited support? Lena's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." But she knew. She knew before she stood up. She knew before she walked down the hallway toward the recovery wing. The world felt unreal as she approached the room number on the file. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door. Inside, a frail old man lay on the bed, eyes closed, breathing shallowly. His face was thinner. His hair was grayer. But it was him, the shoemaker, the man who had given her everything. Lena covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. After all these years, she had found him, and he was fighting for his life. Lena stood frozen in the doorway, afraid that if she moved, the moment would break. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, slow and uneven. Elias looked smaller than she remembered. His hands, once strong and steady, rested weakly on the thin blanket. She stepped inside quietly and closed the door behind her. "Elias," she whispered. His eyelids fluttered, but he did not wake. Lena pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, her knees shaking. She stared at his face, trying to memorize every line, every wrinkle. Guilt rose in her chest, sharp and heavy. She had built a life, a safe one, and he had paid the price. A nurse entered, surprised to see someone with him. "Are you family?" the nurse asked gently. Lena hesitated for half a second. Then she said, "Yes." The word felt true. The nurse nodded. "He's stable for now, but it's serious. He needs surgery. Without it—" She did not finish the sentence. Lena swallowed. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," the nurse replied. "Hours, maybe a day." Lena looked back at Elias. His breathing was shallow. Each rise of his chest looked like it might be the last. "What about payment?" Lena asked, her voice tight. The nurse sighed. "He has no insurance. We've done emergency care, but surgery requires approval. The hospital will not proceed without a guarantee." Lena stood up. "I'll take care of it." The nurse studied her face, then nodded. "Speak to admissions." Lena walked down the hallway like she was moving through water. Her hands were cold. Her thoughts raced. She remembered the tin box, the weight of it in her arms, the way Elias had turned away so she would not feel ashamed. This was why. At admission, she signed forms without hesitation. She offered her own insurance, then her savings, then more. "I'll cover everything," she said firmly, "whatever it takes." The clerk looked surprised. "That's a lot of money." "So was what he gave me," Lena replied quietly. Paperwork was rushed. Calls were made. Doctors were notified. Within an hour, Elias was being prepared for surgery. As they wheeled him down the hall, Lena walked beside the bed holding his hand. "Please," she whispered, "stay." In the operating room, time stretched painfully. Lena sat alone in the waiting area, staring at the floor. Her hands were clasped so tightly her fingers hurt. She prayed, though she was not sure who she was praying to. Not for success, not for luck, just for time. Hours passed. Finally, a surgeon approached her. "The surgery was successful," he said, "but his condition is fragile. The next 24 hours are critical." Lena let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. Tears spilled down her face, silent and unstoppable. "Can I see him?" she asked. Soon after, she sat beside Elias again. Tubes and wires covered his body. His face was pale but peaceful. She brushed his hand gently. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." That night, Elias's condition worsened suddenly. Alarms rang. Nurses rushed in. Lena was pushed back into the hallway as doctors worked urgently. She pressed her forehead against the wall, shaking. "Please," she whispered, "don't let it end like this." Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the doors opened again. "He made it through," a doctor said. "Barely, but he's still with us." Lena sank into a chair, weak with relief. Elias hovered on the edge between life and death for 2 days. Lena never left the hospital. She slept in short bursts. She ate almost nothing. She held his hand and talked to him, telling him about her life, about the shelter, about the bakery, about the hospital job. On the third morning, Elias stirred. His eyes opened slowly. Lena leaned forward, barely breathing. "Elias," she said softly. His eyes focused confusion flickering across his face. "Lena," he whispered. She laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, it's me." Tears rolled down his cheeks. You made it," he murmured. "So did you," she replied. Elias squeezed her hand weakly. I thought I was alone," he said. "You're not," Lena said firmly. "Not anymore." He closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him back towards sleep. But he was alive. And for the first time since he gave away everything, Elias did not feel afraid of dying, because someone was finally there to stay. Elias woke again later that afternoon, the light in the room softer now. His chest still hurt, but the crushing weight was gone. The machines hummed quietly, steady and patient. Lena was there. She sat in the same chair, her head resting against the bed, fast asleep. Dark circles framed her eyes. Her hair had slipped loose from its tie. Elias watched her for a long moment, trying to understand how the frightened girl from his shop had become this woman. He shifted slightly. Lena stirred and lifted her head. "You're awake," she said quickly, standing up. Her voice shook with relief. "How do you feel?" tired Elias whispered. "But here," she smiled through tears. "That's enough." He looked at her face. Really looked. She looked healthy, strong, alive. "You came back," he said. Lena nodded. "I looked for you for years." "I thought you might," Elias said softly. "I hoped." There was a pause. Elias glanced away. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. Lena frowned. "For what?" "For giving you that money," he said. "I left myself with nothing. I was afraid sometimes. I wondered if I had been foolish." Lena shook her head fiercely. "Don't say that." She reached into her bag and pulled out the tin box. Elias's breath caught. She placed it gently on the bed between them. "I kept it," she said. "Empty, but I kept it. Because that box wasn't money. It was a choice. It was you believing I was worth saving. Elias's eyes filled. You saved my life, Lena continued. Not just that night, every day after. When things were hard, I remembered you. When I wanted to give up, I remembered how you didn't. Elias swallowed. And now, you paid for all this. Yes, Lena said simply. Every bill, every treatment. You don't owe anyone anything. Tears ran freely down Elias's face. He did not try to stop them. I never expected this, he whispered. I know, Lena replied. That's why it matters. A nurse entered quietly and smiled when she saw them awake together. You have a strong advocate, she said to Elias. You're lucky. Elias looked at Lena. I am. Over the next weeks, Elias recovered slowly. Lena arranged physical therapy. She brought him soup from home. She sat with him while he struggled to walk again, counting each step with patience. There was no romance between them, only something deeper, something like family chosen and earned. One afternoon, as Elias rested in a chair by the window, he spoke. I was afraid of dying alone, he said. Lena looked at him. You won't. Even if I had, he continued, it would have been worth it. To know you lived. Lena's eyes shone. And now you get both. She helped him back to the small apartment above the shop. Together they cleaned it. They fixed the heater. Lena arranged for help at the shop so Elias did not have to work as hard. The shop reopened, but only a few days a week. Elias sat behind the counter smiling as Lena teased him about being bossy with customers. Life did not become perfect, but it became full. One evening, as the sun set through the shop window, Elias looked at Lena and said, Thank you for finding me. She smiled. Thank you for letting me. They sat together in comfortable silence, the tin box on the shelf nearby, full at last in a different way. Elias never returned to the life he had before, and he didn't need to. The shop stayed open, but only in the mornings. He fixed shoes slowly now, carefully, with more rest between each pair. People noticed the change, but no one complained. They were just glad to see him there, still stitching, still smiling. Lena visited every day. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she brought paperwork. Sometimes she brought nothing but conversation. She helped organize his medicines, walked with him in the afternoons, and made sure the heater stayed on when winter came again. They were not rich, but Elias slept without fear. He no longer woke up reaching for a tin box that wasn't there. When his chest hurt, he knew help was close. When loneliness tried to creep back in, Lena was there sitting across from him, telling stories about her day. One afternoon, Elias watched her lock up the shop and said, You know, I always thought kindness disappeared once it left your hands. Lena smiled. It doesn't disappear, it travels. They shared quiet meals. They shared memories. Elias spoke about Marisol, about the years of silence after she died. Lena listened without rushing him. Lena spoke about the shelter, about fear, about rebuilding herself piece by piece. Elias listened the same way he always had, fully. They did not try to repay each other. They simply lived with gratitude. Kindness given without expectation never truly disappears. Time may pass and paths may separate, but good deeds carry memory and meaning. A single sacrifice can change a life, and sometimes it comes back when it is needed most. Helping someone does not make you weaker. It reveals your strength. Even when the world feels cold, human connection can still save lives. What you give with a pure heart may return in ways you never imagined. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the kindness you've received or given. Share this story with someone who believes small actions don't matter. And remember to like, subscribe, and comment below, because your support helps stories like this reach more people who need hope.